June 24th weekend is a right piss up in Quebec. Saint Jean-Baptiste Day. It's been celebrated in the province, I think, ever since everybody got off the boat in Charlesbourg. Colonists brought the tradition of toasting the Saint's Day from France, and it's stuck. It's a time when everybody lets their hair down and has fun. You get drunk, smoke dope, dance in the streets, paint your face blue, have a parade. There's been times in Quebec when Saint Jean-Baptiste Day has been fraught with nationalism. Few forget 1968 when Pierre Trudeau, by then the Prime Minister of Canada and largely regarded as Federalist swine, crashed the festivities in Montreal, trying to reclaim his Quebec roots, and he was greeted with jeers and beer bottles from the reviewing stand. Fresh off the surprising 1976 victory, the Parti Québécois spent lavishly on the 1977 Jean-Baptiste Day celebration, infusing the holiday weekend with separatist enthusiasm. Premier René Lévesque then declared June 24th a national holiday in the province. 1978, though, became a much more subdued affair, with provincial funding mostly focused on small community events. And so it was in the city of Sherbrooke, which offered clowns and puppet shows for the children, and the traditional evening bonfire at Parc Jacques Cartier on Friday, June 23rd, 1978. No one would have noticed that a young Sherbrooke girl had gone missing that evening. This is who killed Teresa. On Saturday, June 24th, the next day, 3 fishermen hoping to find luck in the shallow waters of Buck Creek instead found the body of 18-year-old Carole Fecteau. Buck Creek is about 32 kilometers southeast of Sherbrooke. It's about 5.5 kilometers from the American border and the village of East Hereford. Fecteau was born in nearby Coaticook. She never went far, ending up dead in a creek 20 kilometers from where she started. The investigation was led jointly by Agent Réal Chateauneuf of the Criminal Investigations Office of the Sûreté du Québec, district of Estrie, and Agent Jacques Filion of SQ Coaticook. The initial assessment by the police or the press or both was a howler. According to them, Fecteau had been shot twice at point-blank range in the head and the heart while nude sunbathing. Never mind that, like Manon Dubé, whose body had been discovered earlier that year, how did she get there? Also, like Dubé and Louise Camera, you'd need a lesson in cartography to find the place. And with this episode, and going forward, there's a geographic visualization of these locations. If you just visit, if you go to this post on teresaallore.com, TheresaAllore.com, there's a link to the Google map. Police questioned over 30 people in connection with the murder. The only other suspicious death investigation by police in the Coaticook region that spring was the Dubé case, her body found on Good Friday, March 24th, 1978. So I want to ground you. We're in 78, 78, 78. We're going to stay in 78, a little bit in 79. What happened in 78 and 79? Teresa Allore went missing, and then her body was found. Get it? Less than 24 hours into the investigation, police had already determined that Fecteau's murder, this is from La Tribune, quote, was a settling of scores or something close to this expression, which often comes up when it comes to shady surroundings and the young girl. This is a description that is both very, very specific and most puzzling. It appears that even before her murder, Fecteau was known to police as a minor player in the Sherbrooke underworld. On January 3rd, 1978, Fecteau had been arrested for her part in a shakedown operation in a downtown Sherbrooke hotel. And the grift went like this. A gang would enlist the cooperation of an underage young girl who would solicit a mark who had been predetermined had a lot of cash. Then she would lure him back to a hotel room, most likely on South Wellington. And once in the hotel room, the guy was ambushed by fellow gang members. In this case, one of them happened to be Carole Fecteau, and rolled him for his cash. In this particular instance, the victim unexpectedly went immediately to the police, who rounded up 4 of the grifters, one of whom was Fecteau. Police suspected as many as 7 people were involved in the scam. One of the grifters, 19-year-old Jean-Paul Leboeuf, was sentenced a few days after Fecteau's disappearance. Fecteau had yet to stand trial, so the reasoning goes, was she murdered because the gang thought she might squawk? Most of what we initially discovered about Carole Fecteau comes from her coroner's inquest, which was held in the late summer fall of 1978. Fecteau had been working as a waitress in Sherbrooke for at least a month before her death. Her mother, Mrs. Jean-Paul Fecteau, made the identification of the body at the city morgue. Fecteau's clothing and wallet were found 2 miles from the dump site by an employee of the Ministry of Transport. Hélène La Rochelle, a 22-year-old bookkeeper, lived in an apartment with Carole Fecteau, whom she knew since the holidays. So I would assume that's Christmas 77. They lived at 146A Sanborn, which is 1 block west and south of King and Wellington. And as we've previously discussed, this is 1 block from the apartment where Luc Gregoire was living on Rue Brooks. If Fecteau was a waitress, then she most likely worked at one of the bars along Wellington, such as the Moulin Rouge, which was located in the Hotel Normandy at King and Wellington. Carole had confided to La Rochelle a few days before her death that she was in danger. And on the evening of her disappearance, June 23, 1978, Fecteau had received a phone call, then told La Rochelle that she was going to a rather dangerous meeting. Fecteau asked La Rochelle to follow her to this meeting. La Rochelle followed Fecteau for a while in the area of King and Wellington, and then eventually she lost sight of her. In fact, Fecteau had received several disturbing phone calls just before her disappearance. And according to La Rochelle, she was fearful of 2 people in particular, whom she referred to as Claire and Fern. In the days leading up to Carole Fecteau's disappearance, there was an incident involving Hélène La Rochelle's car. Fecteau's boyfriend, Marc Charlin, and his older brother, Jean, stole La Rochelle's car and damaged it. And if you recall, the Charlins are the sons of Yvan Charlin, the restaurant business partner of Roland Giguère, murdered in 1968, who we covered in Kentucky Fried Murder. What we're talking about is murder. Fecteau told La Rochelle she'd take care of it, the damages to the car, and that those responsible would pay for the damage. Marc Charlin was a minor, and therefore he was never called to testify at coroner Jean-Pierre Rivard's inquiry, but his older brother was. 19-year-old Jean Charlin said he had seen Carole Fecteau 2 or 3 times at the most, that she was his little brother's girlfriend, that he had gone to her apartment around 2 or 3 o'clock one morning with his brother and 2 other guys, and that they had stolen Helen La Rochelle's car. According to Charlin, Carole threatened to charge Charlin with the theft if he did not agree to pay for the damages. It's unclear how serious Fecteau was in this threat to carry out, going to the police, given that she herself was up on charges for the hotel grift. I think the point here is that Jean Charlin and Carole Fecteau knew each other and that there was friction in that relationship. And I would add, as we shall soon see, concerning the events that unfolded after Fecteau's murder in the early summer of 1978 in South Sherbrooke, it's hard to accept anyone's version of the truth here, especially the stories told by Jean Charlin. So in the book, Wish You Were Here, we, my recollection of this is that I've been talking about Carole Fecteau for years. And and that everybody knows this, and that's not true. I've been talking in my head about Carole Fecteau for years. I don't think I've said nearly a word about it. Somebody commented, I did a Twitter thing about, what's next. And somebody said, I've never heard of this case. I'm like, you've never heard of this case? You crazy? It's been playing in my head for years. But when I went back and looked at it, we spent about a sparse 5 pages in Wish You Were Here on Fecteau's case and the aftermath, and even less, on Fecteau. She in the book was relegated to a footnote. To be honest, I wanted to write much more about Fecteau. In fact, I could have written a whole book about this, which I guess I'm kind of doing now. But book editors, they have publishing goals, and they didn't want a Sherbrooke version of Gorky's The Lower Depths. They wanted a book that presented a more positive victim than poor, forgettable Carole Fecteau. The second obstacle, there just wasn't much information available about her case. And that changed in the spring of 2020 when Quebec's Library of Newspaper Archives began to digitally upload all editions of Sherbrooke's oldest French daily newspaper, La Tribune. So suddenly an entire new perspective was available online, and you could even access it from North Carolina if you knew where to look. And this certainly was a game changer, and I kept quiet about it as I was kind of methodically combing through editions from the late 1970s and 1980s. The spring of 2020 was too late to make any changes to Wish You Were Here. It had already gone to final draft. But that didn't stop me from thoroughly reviewing all the information, looking, I guess obsessively, for connections and meanings as to why the murders of 3 young women remained unsolved for over 40 years. So broadly, I would say that Carole Fecteau was the 4th young murder victim who should be considered within the context of the deaths of Louise Camara, Manon Dubé, and Teresa Allure. The shooting at point blank range and the fact that she was part of this Sherbrooke criminal underworld, there's certainly differences, but there are elements of Fecteau's murder that are similar to the other three murders. Like Camara and Allure, Fecteau was stripped of her clothing. It's hard to argue why this was done if this is strictly an underworld mob assassination. Her clothing was found a few miles from the body. Camara's clothing was found next to her body. Dubé was clothed, and Teresa Allure's clothing was never recovered. Like Teresa Allure's wallet, which was recovered on the side of McDonald Road, Fecteau's wallet was found about 8 feet from the side of a gravel road. And finally, Fecteau was found in a remote area, lying half in and half out of the water, like Allure, like Dubé. So in this sense, there's almost two profile footprints with Fecteau. Her murder is and is not like the others. She's a hybrid. And these murderers, the more I look at it, were not choosy. English, French, young, old, poor, middle class, anyone would do. I think history would have seen Carole Fecteau in this light, in this light of a fourth murder, were it not for the events that took place a little over a week after her body was discovered in Buck Creek, events that eclipsed Fecteau's murder. What happened next rendered Carole Fecteau an afterthought when two bodies were found on July 6th south of Lennoxville by a high schooler. And it's always hunters, fishermen, kids who have the misfortune of finding these bodies. But at that point, and we'll get into those two cases, obviously, Fecteau became a footnote, a piece of evidence in the police's machinations to see to it that their man, I think the wrong man, was put away for life for two murders he probably did not commit. Fecteau got swept away among the true crime jetsam, her murder occurring only 2 months after the discovery of Manon Dubé and 5 months before the disappearance of Teresa Allure. No one remembers her. And if they don't remember Fecteau, then they certainly are unaware that her murder has never been solved. Not because it can't be solved. When police looked at the evidence, they determined her murder did not fit with their narrative. So they said close enough and they called it a day. That too we'll get into. That's what happened to Carole Fecteau. But they didn't realize that the murder of Carole Fecteau may be the most important clue to solving those other 1978 murders in the Eastern Townships. More of that we'll get into. This is who killed Teresa. Nude bathing. Nude bathing. Hey, Chief, can you give us the scoop? Yeah, she was nude bathing. Take back that your paper, Jimmy Olsen. Yeah, I don't, to what degree they were serious when they said that or not. I mean, who are they that dumb? Allow me to transport myself 20 miles because I don't have a car, so I'll just teleport here to Buck Creek and and by the way, deposit my clothes 2 miles away, whatever. While I partake in some nude bathing. I don't know. Who knows what really goes on in police's heads. You got to work with them, but I'm bitterly laughing because I know what comes next. I know what comes next, and it's so painful and tragic. And with Carole Fecteau, I just feel an immense sense of bitter loss, because as a victim, she was so poorly treated by everyone. I mean, even in the news accounts, there's one photo and then she's quickly forgotten about. In any column, she's sort of like like the last paragraph. She's mentioned in the last paragraph. She never gets her own story, really. She doesn't. She never gets her own story. She's always seen in light of other things. And it's really depressing and disheartening to see that. I mean, the other interesting thing about this, and just laying this out, you might say, well, hey, John, why don't you interview some of these people? You should talk to some of these people. And in one sense, I'd say, well, you should talk to some of these people. Don't put that on me, or the police should talk to some of these people. Now, on the one hand, and again, I'm doing a tell here. A lot of these people are dead. Let's face it, they're all dead. But what is interesting is there's some real young people here that we're talking about. 19-year-old Jean Charlin, 19-year-old Carole Fecteau, 19-year-old Jean-Paul Leboeuf, the guy who was sentenced for the grift. I mean, these are. On the one hand, I'm thinking maybe they're still alive. On the other hand, there's a whole angle of victims and crimes who are really, really young. I think young, to be involved in that. And what does that say? And what are the implications there? Broad strokes, are they, in a sense, which I would think they are, because they're on the front line in the arrests, but in what sense is the youth really the front line, the ones who take the fall, the ones whose lives are taken, while behind the scenes there's somebody pulling the strings, controlling everything, who we never hear from, who we rarely get to focus on, or the police get to prosecute. I guess that would be my point. If you like the podcast, please go to the website teresalore.com, and you can do us a solid by following us on social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. At this point, what would be really good, if you've all completed like an iTunes review or something like that, would be if you went to Amazon and reviewed the book. And if you go, well, I haven't read the book yet. It's going on sale in the States in 3 weeks. You can buy it for a song, I think, for $12. I think the next great thing is if you went to Amazon.com, not Amazon.ca. Fuck those people. Go to Amazon.com. Or your local bookseller. You could always, go to them and say, I'd like to buy this. I'd like to pre-order. Wish you were here, please. That would be even better. But I know that's not practical for some people. Go to Amazon.com and give it a review. That would be super cool, and I'd appreciate it. That's all for this week. Obviously, that's all I have to say about Carole Fecteau. My job is untangling her from her previous role as a footnote and putting some substance and meaning into what her death was really all about. And we'll get into that as we move forward. Back here, we're back to weekly podcasts of this shoe. That is all for today. I hope you have a great one. I'm John Allure. This is Who Killed Teresa. Have yourselves a great day.